This video is from my earlier course, back when I was building out these ideas. The fundamentals I cover here are still solid, but the frameworks have evolved significantly since then. Head to systemthinkinglab.ai to see how this turned into a full course series. Hello, and welcome to our next lesson. Fact, all digital data is made up of zeros and ones. Let's jump in. So in this lesson, we'll understand that all digital systems are built upon zeros and ones. At the time of this recording, everything digital, every computer, every cell phone, anything that you consider a digital system is built on zeros and ones, and we'll talk about how and why in this lesson. Grasping this binary foundation is crucial for understanding how data storage and tasks function at the lowest level. We'll talk more about this in the next slides. So now let's just talk about the beginning of computing several years ago, the genesis of computing. Early computers directly operated on binary principles. So the binary system that uses two states, typically represented as 0 or 1. 0 being off, 1 being on. These early computers were it was very obvious that every aspect of their ability to compute tasks, to complete tasks, and the ability to store data hinged upon the ability to be either something to be off or considered a 0, or something to be on and considered a 1. Transistors are the physical representation of this. It is like in electrical engineering, the transistor is a device that has the ability to either pass through a current, it being on, or cut off a current being 0. This ability to hold either a current going through something or to block the ability for a current to go through something is the essence of data, and it's the essence of how storage and tasks are done and manipulated and executed on computers that we know. So, task-focused computer components, right? The idea is that there are two aspects of computers. There's a number of components in computers that work together. The ones that are focused on executing tasks are the CPU. You may have heard of it, Central Processing Unit. It executes instructions and performs arithmetic and logical operations. Pretty much the vast majority of all the operations that happen in the computer that makes it, the ability to even listen to this recording right now is due to the CPU being able to process data and show things to the screen. But there's also a GPU, a graphics processing unit that's originally designed for rendering graphics. Usually you'll have like either a dedicated or a one that's embedded GPU within your computer that's responsible for the things that you see on the screen. So it has a separate unit that's processing data so that you can, to produce zeros and ones that gets translated into things that you can see, as into your screen, into your monitor, into your phone, so on and so forth. It is highly efficient at mathematical calculations, which is why now it is widely used in AI and machine learning tasks. But understand that these are the components of the computer that are using zeros and ones to execute instructions, aka tasks. Now, there are storage-focused computer components. RAM, or random access memory, a short-term volatile memory that is very fast to read and write, but it doesn't retain data without power. This is used for calculations, for the CPUs to the calculations and intermediate results and so on and so forth, in order to be able to more efficiently execute the operations that you have in the computer. It's like a storage space, a temporary storage space that's very fast to read and write from. In contrast, there's disk storage. You ever heard like a hard drive or so on and so forth. These are long-term, non-volatile memory, slower reads and write speeds compared to RAM, but it retains data even when the system is powered off. So, when you're writing a document, even if it's on the cloud or so on and so forth, you want to be able to turn off your computer or even turn off the service wherever it's hosted. And then if you turn it back on, you want it to still be there. So you have this disk storage, which tends to be larger, but slower to read and write from, but it's still retained when the system is powered off. So this is a somewhat simplified idea, but if you just think of these two aspects, you have these task-focused computer components that are responsible for executing tasks and instructions, and you have these storage-focused computer components that is responsible for storing data, either to make it easy to read and write from quickly, or to store it for long term and to, so that you can actually have your data after your computer turns off. So have those two in mind. At the heart of both of these are transistors. The ability to have something that can be considered zero or off, or one or on. This is the fundamental component in electrical engineering. These semiconductor devices are used to amplify or make sure the current continues or switch off electrical signals. These transistors you'll see both in storage and in task components in order to, and they're basically the basis of how zeros and ones are essentially in every single thing that we do digitally. Talking more about transistors is that, as I mentioned before, it holds a binary state, can be in one of two states, conducting or on, or non-conducting or off. And these states represent binary data, 1 as on and 0 as off. Their function in computers is to act like switches controlling the flow of electrical current in circuits. Billions and billions of transistors are used in CPUs, GPUs, RAM, and storage devices. So again, this transistor, this basic unit, physical unit, that can represent a 0 or a 1, whether it's conducting or non-conducting, is a fundamental component in both the components of the computer that execute instructions, which is CPUs and GPUs, and the central components for the storage-focused components like RAM and storage devices. So in essence, everything boils down to zeros and ones. All operations in a computer are ultimately represented in binary. High-level tasks are translated down to binary code that the hardware can execute. Any programming language that you use, doesn't matter what it is, at the end of the day, boils down to zeros and ones. It might have a number of steps to do so, number of compilers, or just-in-time compilation, or assembly language, or so on and so forth, but at the end of the day, it goes down to these transistors, and they understand either 0, non-conducting, or 1, conducting. That is what they understand. These hardware components, CPUs, GPUs, RAM, and disk storage, are all composed of these transistors, and transistors operate using binary states to process and store data. This is what's really fundamental to understand. This is that all the systems that we build, everything that we're going to talk about in this course, anything that's built out in the world, at the end of the day, boils down to these transistors that represent 0 and 1 in a large scale, essentially. To hammer this point, the early computers, the way that you programmed them was with punch cards. You literally had a physical card, and you programmed, in a line, and if you wanted to represent 1, I believe you punched that part out. If you wanted to represent 0, you didn't. And you fed this actual physical card into the computer, and it executed your program, because that was your storage or your data. You're feeding in the instructions there, and it would execute your application. Programmers use these punch cards to input data and instructions, as I mentioned, but these limitations, if you can imagine, it's a lot of paper, time-consuming, error-prone. Imagine what debugging looked like during those days, and limited the complexity and productivity of programming. But then we went from low-level, went from that direct 0 and 1 programming to low-level languages to high-level languages. If you ever heard of assembly language, it's a low-level language that uses mnemonic codes for operations. It's closer to the machine code, the zeros and ones, but more human-readable than binary. Then high-level languages took assembly language as those basic bits and made it even more easy to express instructions to the computer. Examples include Fortran, C++, Python, the list goes on and on. These are more abstract, allowing for easier expression of complex tasks, and are compiled or interpreted down to binary code. But again, even the highest level language, at the end of the day, still boils down to zeros and ones. So, There's patterns and abstractions to think about. And this aspect is what is at the heart of this course. These higher level languages are built upon lower level language abstractions. These abstractions allow for more expressive and efficient coding. So the ability now to write something that's higher level, that like one, let's say, line could be maybe 20 lines of assembly code, which could be like thousands of zeros and ones. These things are possible because we are able to associate certain aspects of lower level languages into an abstraction that's expressed in a line of code. So we don't have to. I'm not going to go into specifics right now, but the idea here, though, is that we have this idea of componentization and modularization from machine code to assembly language, from assembly language to more higher level languages. And this is how we're able to have the high level languages that we have today, like JavaScript and so on and so forth. This concept, I'm calling building blocks. Systems are constructed from basic components that recur from different applications. So just as higher level programming languages abstract complexity, systems can be built using modular applications and components. And these components serve as building blocks that can be combined to design complex systems. What I'm saying here is, as you can see, the actual computers that we use eventually only understand zeros and ones. However, we were able to progressively build higher level languages that gives us the ability to express ourselves and to be able to program things a lot in more complexity than we did before. The punch cards of 50, 60, 70 years, 50 years ago can only do basic applications, doing calculations like calculating like 3 plus 4, and what does that mean? That took some time with punch cards. However, now with higher level languages, you basically just say 3 plus 4. You write 3 plus 4, and it understands that because it takes that 3 plus 4 statement you wrote, and it breaks it down to all the lower level assembly languages, which breaks it down to all the zeros and ones that you would have had to punch card in, and it does that all for you just by writing 3 plus 4. This is done because there are a number of building blocks, an add building block, let's say, a number building block. I'm just, it all depends on the language, but I'm just giving examples. It's because these building blocks were constructed, these abstractions, that were able to put things together so that we can actually have these higher level languages and be able to write 3 plus 4 without having to know the individual zeros and ones for every single, zeros and ones that would be necessary in order to make that calculation. I say this is that we're going to translate from code to systems, the applications that you build, this course is about system designs of end-to-end applications. The idea that there's also building blocks of systems. There are a number of building blocks, proven things that we use all the time, that we understand how they work, they understand how they form. They're also ultimately zeros and ones as well, but there's even higher abstract and high-level programming languages because a single building block can have a lot of instructions and a lot of storage as well in order to that work together to perform a single unit. This is going to be the heart of this course, to really identify all these building blocks and show how you can mix and match them in order to understand and design the systems of today. So recognizing these building blocks aids in the understanding and designing robust systems. So the dual role of zeros and ones, they can be data storage. Binary data represents information stored in memory and disk. Task execution, binary instructions dictate operations performed by the CPU and or the GPU, but the key concept is zeros and ones are used for both as storage and as tasks. There is a understanding that there is a fundamental basic unit of 0 and 1 that underlies everything. And when you understand that, even as things get complex, understand that the root of it all is actually very simple. And as we can understand the building blocks and understand the fundamental usage of all these different building blocks, understanding that we're always deriving to the same fundamental idea of zeros and ones makes it easy and actually easier to understand and to grasp the connections of how different building blocks can be similar to each other, how systems can be similar to each other, and so on and so forth. So, data versus tasks. In comp sci class, you typically would take a data structures class. This is directly analogous to what we're talking with data storage. It's a study of efficient ways to organize and store data. Examples, arrays, linked lists, trees, and graphs. How do you organize these zeros and ones? How do you represent these zeros and ones into a form that's really useful for application? And now, you also typically take an algorithm course. This associates with task execution. What are the step-by-step procedures for solving problems or performing tasks? And you focus on the order and the efficiency of the instructions. So you see this idea, data structures with data storage, zeros and ones still, algorithms with task execution, still zeros and ones as well. But again, the unifying concept is that both data structures and algorithms revolve around manipulating zeros and ones and understanding that you have this common unit, this common understanding enhances the comprehension of higher level concepts. So our next steps is first, recognize that digital data is made up of zeros and ones. This is fundamental. Now, this perspective, it gives an insight of how we can build and understand more complex systems beyond high-level languages to design the systems that we build today. Now, our upcoming lessons will delve deeper at storage with zeros and ones and its tasks as zeros and ones. Really focus on how each of them are the same, how they're different, how they work together into building blocks in order to build the systems that we have for today. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. This was from my original course on system design for junior engineers. Since then, I've refined and expanded everything you just saw into the full system thinking and AI era course, using these same building block principles across 15 plus real case studies. If this resonated with you, the link is in the description.